It's the most wonderful time of the year, Christmas 2021. Of course, with it being Christmas, there are always going to be some types of controversies that go with the season. We love that here, especially some of the more stupid ones. And we have some absolutely ridiculous cases to talk about tonight. For example, why are people so upset about kids receiving Nerf guns from Santa? People, there's a lot more to get mad about these days. And we have some more substantial arguments. Is Xmas an acceptable abbreviation to Christmas? Does it have an acceptable historical context that overrides the very reality that in the English language, the X does take the Christ out of Christmas? With the power of the written language, what kind of damage is this doing to society's concept of the Christmas season? And this leads to the most important aspect of tonight's show, the declining relevancy of Christianity during the celebration of Christmas, and the turning of Christmas into a secular, commercial holiday. Now, even more worrying, the miracles of the first Christmas are not only declining with regards to its importance to the average American and average Christian, but even in the belief that they are actual historical events. And as we will talk about, belief in the miracles of the first Christmas are just as foundational to the Christian faith as the belief in the miracle of Easter. And last, because it is so important, we'll have a telling of the Christmas story straight from the Bible, straight from a pastor. Very special guest tonight, my father, Matt Bassford, no relation.
Yeah, funny. Merry Christmas to y'all. Thank you for having me on the show. As now, I guess I'm officially a canceled misfit, at least for honorarily.
He's an honorary one, yeah.
Yeah, honorary, just for tonight anyway.
So, I mean, thank you for being on the show.
Glad to do it.
Having a professional here definitely will, elevate this one in many ways.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you're a professional speaker.
I'm something for sure. Anyway, thank you, Gray. I appreciate you having me, and it's my honor to be on your show tonight.
So, what's it, Monday? Christmas is Saturday. I got to ask you, what are some of your favorite Christmas memories? I know some of them involve me, so go ahead. Yeah. Don't worry about ripping on me too much.
No, I won't rip on you. I tell you, one of my favorite Christmas memories was, first of all, Christmas of 1989, a long time before you were around.
That was before the war, right?
Back before the war, right? The big war.
The big war.
The big war. So, 1989, I hadn't even really known your mom. I'd met your mom, but we certainly weren't dating. But the day before Christmas, I was there working my mom's bookstore and Christian bookstore. And on Christmas Eve, about 3 o'clock, the snow rolled in here in Florida, in Marianna, Florida. And it was blowing hard. I mean, it was coming down, kind of like the snow used to come down when we lived in Arkansas. And on Christmas Eve and Christmas morning, we had a white Christmas here in Florida. And that's a memory I'll never forget. Another one, and you'll love this one. I asked him pre-show if he had any memory of this.
I did not.
Barely. Years ago, we were living in Cabot, Arkansas, and Gray and his sister were pretty young. And there was a place that was a Christmas tree farm near our home, and they were ready to close up shop. They were closing out of business. They'd been there for many, many years, since the 60s, I suppose, and so they decided, because they wanted all their Christmas trees clear cut, that they were going to sell their Christmas trees for the exact same price per foot that they sold them for in 1966.
Wow.
So it was like 5 cents a foot or something. So we thought, let's take advantage of this, and we went and picked out a Christmas tree that was bigger than this one.
Wow.
It was probably not quite as tall, but it was bigger around, and half of our living, well, it was kind of tipped over on the ceiling.
Wasn't the ceiling slanted?
It was kind of a vaulted ceiling, but it was tipped over on the top, and then down at the bottom, about a third to a half of our living room was taken up by tree, and we still laugh about that.
What did you bring it home in? It could have been your old White Ranger.
Yeah, I think it was. I think I kind of tied it on top and then let it lay down in the bed. Yeah, that old Ranger. There's some good memories in that old thing. I drove it 375,000 miles.
I think mine's getting close to yours.
Yeah.
So I know one Christmas that we didn't talk about before the show, but I know one that's kind of very important for us was the one back in 2006 with Brody. So I have two younger brothers. One's 10 years younger than me. He was born in 2006, and it could have been a very bad Christmas for our family. So, you want to recap some of that?
I would
This is our
love
own
to.
Christmas
I would
miracle.
love to tell this story. I've told it many times, and I've never gotten through it without getting a little emotional, to be honest with you. But early in December, his little brother Brody of 2006, his mom went into labor with him very, very early, very early. He wasn't due until February, and this was early December. So we obviously went to our doctor, and they put us in the hospital. And because the hospital where we were living at the time did not have a neonatal ICU available, they transferred us to Montgomery, Alabama. And we spent the entire month of December, and I know you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Separated from our young family. My mom helped out so much, taking care and tried to do the best we could. But needed to be and stay close to his mom for that. Well, when it got to be about December 22nd, 21st, 22nd, we had successfully kept him from coming out, if you will, and safely. It was to the point where they would accept him at the regular nursery at Flowers Hospital in Dothan. So we came home. She rode an ambulance back. Our doctors were there. It was just our family was there. We wanted to be home
A lot more
for
support
Christmas.
structure. And
Yeah, we wanted to be home for Christmas, so we did that. And we weren't there very long before an emergency sort of situation came up, and he had to be delivered surgically, and his lungs were not prepared for that.
now, at this point, he was, what, 6 weeks early?
About roughly,
Roughly
yes,
6
roughly.
weeks.
And his lungs hadn't developed. I could tell a funny story, but I don't know that it would really be good. I'll tell it. Go
Hey,
ahead.
after what I said a couple of weeks ago, I don't think anything is over the top.
One of my wife's two OBGYN doctors was a little short black lady named Dr. Torrance, and she was a hoot, and we had a good time with her. She was really fun. If Dr. Torrance ever sees this, I'm sure she'll remember, because it was Christmas Eve.
Make sure to send it to her.
Yeah, it was Christmas Eve, and Brody had been born, and we were trying to make the decision whether to send him back on the ambulance to Montgomery. And so Dr. Torrance came in, and she said, and she's dressed to go. It was Christmas Eve day. She's dressed to go to church. She had her hat on, so you know how particular folks are sometimes to go into church on Christmas. And so she's in there, and she's trying to explain why we're going to have to send him back because of his lungs. And she made the comment, Reverend Bassford, if your son Brody were an African American female, we wouldn't have any problems, because African American females typically do well when they're born early for whatever reason.
For whatever reason.
I looked at Dr. Torrance, this little black lady, and I said, Dr. Torrance, if he were an African American female, we'd have a whole different problem. She teed it up, and I hit it. But anyway,
Sometimes you got to do that.
yeah, I use humor to get past some of the stuff. So
Yeah, it was a terrible time, because I remember, just from my perspective, I know you got more of the story, but from my perspective, I remember going back and forth, and of course seeing mom in the
Complete bed
room.
rest, yeah.
Complete bed rest. We were trying to cheer her up some. I think we were talking about back like when Photoshop was first becoming a thing. We got this amazing camera that we were going to take a picture and Photoshop her in this nice meadow, if I remember correctly.
Oh wow, I don't remember that, but that's pretty funny.
But yeah, so like I remember some happy stuff. I remember just worry driving back and forth.
Yeah.
Because I mean, at 10 years old,
I remember taking y'all to Target, not far from the hospital, there for Christmas shopping for mom or whatever. And it was a hard time.
Yeah.
But moving into after his birth, and he was struggling. His chest was cavitating. His lungs were just not there yet. And so they did on Christmas Eve decide to send him back to Montgomery, Alabama, which is about an hour and a half away from where we live. And so I followed the ambulance. Now, get this, when I got the word, I was in my suit preparing to preach on Sunday morning, Christmas Eve morning. And I just said, y'all have to handle it. And I followed the ambulance. I didn't get a toothbrush. I didn't get a change of clothes. And followed the ambulance, got there, and all day they're processing him in. And I'm sitting there watching It's a Wonderful Life.
Talk about it in a minute.
In a hospital waiting room in my suit on Christmas Eve. About 10:30 that night, I finally got in to see him. and it's this big room. I want to paint the picture for you. This big room, and each baby has their own nurse and has their own machines that's hooked up to them. And he had wires coming out of everywhere, belly button, toes, everything. So we're there, and so I'm having to scrub up, and he's not very far away. And I had met his nurse. And by the way, this is Christmas Eve, and her name is Joy, which is by far no coincidence. And so I'm scrubbing up, and it's about midnight on Christmas Eve, and Joy's standing over there attending to Brody. And so maybe 10 feet away. So I start singing "Oh Holy Night" to myself, a cappella, while I'm scrubbing my hand. And Joy hears me, and being a musician herself, she begins to sing really tight harmony with me. And we sing all the way through "Oh Holy Night" at midnight on Christmas Eve. And when we got finished, I looked around, and all the nurses had stopped doing what they were doing, and the machines were beeping a little bit, but that was really the only sound other than our two voices echoing through that big neonatal ICU singing "Oh Holy Night" on Christmas Eve. I'll never forget it till the day I die. It was just a very emotional, very raw, very special Christmas Eve.
Yeah. I mean, that you can see why with our family, Christmas is such a important holiday. We celebrate honestly the miracle, because Brody probably should not have made it out of that NICU. Thankfully, he's a fighter. He still is, so got to beat him up from time to time. But he wasn't going to let something like underdeveloped lungs stop him from
Well, he finally decided that he was done with that NICU. He pulled all the stuff out, pulled his oxygen out, and so the nurses and doctors said, "I think he's telling us he needs to get ready to go home a few days later." So in the end, it was a blessing, and he is a fighter, and so that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you
Christmas,
for reminding me of that story. Yeah.
Christmas is a very important time for us, not just for the memories that we have. I mean, we do have traditions. I know he's saying It's a Wonderful Life. I think for the past 15 years
or so,
something like that. We watch it every Christmas Eve night.
Sometimes bleeds over into Christmas.
Sometimes it bleeds over into Christmas morning. We finally set out the cookies and milk about 1:30 in the morning. So, of course, my sister decides that she likes to wake everyone up at about 6 o'clock in the morning every Christmas.
The Christmas she turned 16, she thought she was getting a car. And buddy, we were up way before daylight that morning.
Oh man, and I think it's even worse now that she has her own daughter.
I think it is.
Any other Christmas traditions that you can really?
Well, I thought about "It's a Wonderful Life."
Right.
We can quote.
We can probably quote the whole
crummy
movie.
little town off my feet, and I'm going to see the world. We've seen it many, many times, and now we've incorporated his two younger brothers in our tradition, so it probably will go on for a long, long time.
Yeah. As long as they keep playing it before it gets canceled,
Yeah, I don't know. In this cancel culture, we have a DVD, so they can't cancel.
They can't cancel our DVD.
No, they sure can't.
So it's kind of getting into the meat of the show. We do have some controversies we want to talk about. One of which that I spoke of is I'm just going to read this tweet from the NRA. It says Montana didn't want to give Michael a Nerf gun for Christmas and made him cry. The NRA made it our mission to fix this and make Michael's Christmas the best ever. And people did not like this. They acted like the NRA came and gave him a big old, I don't know, Ma Deuce 50 caliber Barrett, something or another. And like I said, it's ridiculous. It's a Nerf gun. I mean, I don't know of a better way to teach a young child gun safety rules than this. Mm-hmm. If he's hopefully grows up to, enjoy having the Second Amendment, enjoy shooting and being able to defend himself. What do you think? What do you think about this?
I think it's much ado about nothing. I think that anytime the far left or the woke culture or whomever has anything with a gun involved, they think that there's some kind of nefarious intent in giving a kid a gun, when in fact there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Absolutely, it's much ado about nothing.
Mm-hmm. It's literally fires foam bullets. Now, if they had shown up with like an AR-15 for the kid, they might, people might have a thing.
Or even a BB gun, you'll shoot your eye out.
Yeah.
It's Christmas time.
It's Christmas time, you filthy animal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like they taught him how to do the Home Alone, the Rube Goldberg machines he used to defend himself.
Yeah, that's funny.
But I mean, there's a lot of things you can learn from that. You can learn, like I said, gun safety, which honestly leads to, being more responsible out in the real world. But some responses to this were, there's no hunting like the hunting of man, except for maybe Santa. Something like, you guys turned Santa into a terrorist. Congrats. And
Yeah.
that's the craziest one right there. Like, it's the Nerf gun, dude. Calm down.
There's no shortage of crazy people
There
out
is
there.
no shortage of crazy people. Get on
It's
Twitter.
absolutely ridiculous. It really is. And I honestly, us giving this a little time, we can make fun of them. That's the only reason to even bring this up.
It is just absolutely. There's things to be outraged about. We talk about it every week here.
Yeah.
There's something. There's kids, schools helping kids transition without telling their parents. That one
That's bad.
over in Tallahassee, which is not where I'm at, by the way. We are in an undisclosed location, shooting on location, which
With
is
a
nice.
Christmas tree in
With
the
a
background.
Christmas tree in the back. I thought y'all might like that, but yeah, there's plenty of stuff to get outraged, and this is just, you make fun of people who get outraged like this. I mean, there's got to be some civil discourse in this country.
Yes,
But this is not something to be civil about. This is something to make fun of them about.
It really is. That's the only reason to.
And I know you're not one to really make fun of people so much, but to try and engage in civil discourse.
I do, but when they make it this easy, what
yeah,
do you do?
If
It's
they
a
tee
Nerf
it up,
gun.
if they tee it up, you hit it.
That's
right?
exactly right, Gray, and that's the fact of the matter. The NRA made this big to do about, and I'm not always a huge fan of the NRA. I think that they take it sometimes to a more ridiculous end on the other end, fearing a slippery slope with the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, however, I think they just had some fun with it, with this kid having a Nerf gun war with Santa.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
funny.
It's funny. I wonder if he beat Santa.
It doesn't really matter. Santa's so padded, it didn't hurt at all.
It's a Nerf gun. Why would it hurt?
Yeah, right.
So moving on, this we're going to move on to something a little bit more serious, and this is something that happens year after year after year. Many churches put out official statements about this, and I think we'll get into it in a minute. But it's the argument: does the word Xmas take Christ out of Christmas? So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. Some argue the abbreviation Xmas was created by religious haters. If you write Xmas, they assert you're helping to commercialize the holiday and wipe away its true meaning. And supposedly they're misinformed. The term Xmas came about centuries ago. The first letter of the Greek word for Christ is chi, the capital X in the Greek language. So Xmas is an old, respectable abbreviation for Christmas. And what I say is that may be the case. But the big question here is if the historical use of if the X equals chi equals the first letter of Christ in the Greek alphabet is still an acceptable reason for Christians to use Xmas instead of Christmas. And just what are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry. I didn't want that thing to vibrate anymore.
Yeah,
I apologize.
you're good.
Gray. I'm probably along the same lines. Traditionally, I've always thought of it that way: is why would you put an X there instead of writing Christ? Mm-hmm. Are we really that short on ink and paper that we can't write out Christ? I did read you an article that I read this week from R.C. Sproul, who is no lightweight.
No,
He's
not a bit.
He is a theological juggernaut, if you will, and he wrote an article that's actually defending the use of X in Christmas, in that there's nothing wrong with it. I disagree with Dr. Sproul, actually. I agree with you that and I don't see it as being this big conspiracy, which it very well may be. Somebody said, let's try to get Christ out of Christmas. I think it's just people being unthinking. Yeah, I don't think it's a deep state. I think it's just people being unthinking. Mm-hmm. I really do.
I do. I think it has more effects, though, beyond just an innocent, I'm going to put it Xmas here. First of all, you go out on the street, you ask 100 people how many knew this fact that X equals chi equals the first.
Nobody.
You're going to get 0 out of 100. Maybe 1 if you come upon, a Jeopardy.
Yeah, right.
A Jeopardy player or something.
Aaron Rodgers or somebody.
maybe from a Mark Twain quote.
Yeah.
But so historically, they might have a case why this was acceptable when the language was first kind of moving from the Greek language, morphing into the English language. But now it literally is like in today's world, you put an X over something, you're crossing it out. You are putting it out. And I think that fact alone makes us more harmful to the Christian, to Christmas, especially for Christians to use, than to just say, well, there's the historical context. Like, it's bad. It's not good. The written word isn't powerful.
I agree. I agree with your position on this, Gray. There's no controversy with me on this. I completely agree with you.
But so yeah, I mean, should Christians stop doing it? Absolutely.
I agree. I've never done it, not one time.
Yeah, no, there's no good reason to do it.
It felt bad. It felt
awkward.
It feels wrong to do that. I agree.
So I'm glad you're in agreement with this, and I hope that as Christians, we can see that there's really no good reason to take Christ out of Christmas, and I hope that we can, in the future, take that out into public sphere. I doubt it, but as we're going to see in just a minute, the actual Christian realities of Christmas is actually down on the downhill slope, which leads us to our biggest story for tonight. So Pew in 2017 put out this survey that they called people all over America. They asked them these questions, and it kind of fell along the same lines of the 2014 survey. It says, as long-simmering debates continue over how American society should commemorate the Christmas holiday, a new Pew Research Center survey finds the most U.S. adults believe the religious aspects of Christmas are emphasized less now than in the past, even as relatively few Americans are bothered by this trend. In addition, a declining majority say religious displays such as nativity scenes should be allowed on government property, and compared with 5 years ago, a growing share of Americans say it does not matter to them how they are greeted in stores and businesses during the holiday season, whether with Merry Christmas or, less religious holidays, greetings like Happy Holidays. So there's been a moral decline in America. This is probably an X does not equal Y scenario, but I think some of it does. Mm-hmm. Some of it goes to how Christmas is slowly going from a very religious, very Christian holiday into the secular holiday where Santa comes and brings gifts.
It has turned into a secular holiday. There's no other way around it, even among Christians. I agree with you. Now, when I'm in a store and someone says Happy Holidays, I always say Merry Christmas. Always. Yeah. And that may just be a little stubbornness in my part.
People need to we need to be more stubborn in a lot of ways.
But the fact is I can remember several years ago, I have a friend who now lives in North Carolina. I hope you're watching the show, Chris. He was the tax collector in Okaloosa County where I lived. And he actually had a guy who brought a suit against the tax collector's office because he played Christian Christmas music during the holidays.
When was this?
This was in 1999, 2000.
Wow.
And he made a big stink, first of all, in the paper. And if I'm not mistaken, he actually sued the tax collector's office for playing Christmas music on public, it's a public office, elected office. It's funded by public funds. And this guy wanted it any mention of anything Christian on Christmas music. You can't separate the two.
No, you can't, because
you cannot. Yeah. And I don't think anything came of it. Long-standing case law is pretty clear. Mm-hmm. It's kind of his discretion. Like nativity scenes on the courthouse lawn.
A lot of places are trying to cut that down too, as we're going to see in a minute.
They're facing an uphill battle. Mm-hmm. They are, because there's been a lot of case law that said yes, it should be secular, but we're not going to worry about it right here. Kind of like red mass for the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, going back to, and this is a little bit of a tangent here, but people think that there's separation of government and religion, difference between church and state, but that doesn't mean that elected officials check their beliefs at the door.
Some people think they should.
Some people think they should, but I don't
That's
think
ridiculous.
It's not really. Why you're not going to vote for someone and then say, okay, all of your morals, ideas, worldview should be
It's a ridiculous it's a ridiculous notion for Christians to leave their Christianity outside of the voting booth.
Yeah.
It's insane to think that something that important to someone is not going to inform their decision in a voting booth, or if they're elected, inform their decision in Congress.
And people think that, the fact that freedom of religion, and this is, I know it's a soundbite, I know it's a cookie cutter saying, but freedom of religion means does not mean freedom from religion.
I've heard that saying many times,
and that's just it's not how. Again, you can't expect someone to take their worldview, what informs all of their decisions, and just chuck it out the door.
Well, and I read some more on this, as far as separation of church and state, because that's really what we're talking about here. It really is, especially when you talk about nativity scenes on public property, or playing Christmas carols when people are on hold with the tax collector's office, when in fact, that is nowhere near where the framers of the Constitution, and I know this is a big tangent, but
go for it.
There's nowhere near what they meant. They were all God-fearing men. They were all religious men, and they did not want society divorced from religion.
Weren't like 52 of the 55 signers churchgoers, with many of them being deacons and leaders in their churches?
They were. And it's to superimpose modern understanding upon that, it's absolutely asinine to do that.
100%. So to get back,
sorry.
No, absolutely. I love it. But to get kind of back on track, what are some discussions we could have that lead to Christmas, and particularly the Christian fundamental aspects of it, becoming more of a driving force? Because as Christians, not only do we want to propagate our faith, but we want to propagate what that leads to as well, right? So What are some of these conversations you think we could have, and do they need to be with big, huge discussions with giant, like conventions with large groups of people, or do they need to be held more at a individual person's level, just face to face talking about it?
All I can speak for is my own ministry and my own life. You as our family, we missed a lot of Christmas mornings being at family, because every year that I've been a pastor, we commemorate Christmas with a very deeply quiet, moving, religious service at our church, where we take the Lord's Supper. We have candlelight communion. We come together. It's probably our most popular service of the year.
It's really a beautiful service,
because it revolves around the coming of the Christ. Now, of course, a church is going to do that, but I didn't grow up in a church that was like that. In fact, I'd never been to a Christmas Eve service until I preached my first Christmas Eve service. Never. That was not our tradition.
That was something I didn't know.
Yeah, that's not our tradition growing up in my home church and otherwise. But the fact of the matter is, it's not a public policy thing. It is a in your heart of Christian thing. That, and we as Christians commercialize Christmas too much. We do. We talk about Santa way more than we talk about Jesus, especially when we have young children. And it is a one-on-one thing. It's a family thing. It's a church thing.
I think a lot of our societal woes would be solved, at least in a much more effective way, if we realize that a lot of these failings of the Christian communities are because we're not taking them at a family level.
I agree. And families are so important. In fact, God established a family before he established the church. And I think that's significant, and it's significant in its order. So,
yeah, I 100% agree. Again, a lot of our societal woes would probably go to the wayside. All the crime that's rising would be and this is another tangent, surprise, if fathers would be there. I think that's the biggest thing, is we have a fatherless home problem that is in a lot of ways leading to, I mean, you could make the argument it's leading to this, but more realistically, you could lead to the problem that it's leading to crime and
every research I've ever read all point to the same thing. It's like stupid death. We could tell you what the answer is, but we want to point to some other thing when it's nothing else but that.
Well, people don't want to take the personal responsibility that is a father staying home and raising his kids with the mother. So
I mean, it's as obvious as the nose on our faces, but people want to try anything else but that, because it's not politically correct to say that. It's not culturally sound. It promotes the patriarchy, as some people would say. I showed you a
Yeah,
I
you showed me that
meme.
picture. You showed me that meme. I had for those of you who didn't know who, well, I guess nobody out there can see it. It had a umbrella. It said the Father, and then under
Had
it
Jesus.
had Jesus, right? And then underneath it had the father, the husband / father of the home, and his responsibilities. And then under that umbrella it had the wife and the children and their responsibilities to the family. A very traditional. Honestly, 20 years ago, probably not too controversial. But yeah. So anyways, getting back to this Pew Research paper. So not only are some of the more religious aspects of Christmas less prominent in the public sphere, but there are signs that they are on the wane in America's private lives and personal beliefs as well. For instance, there's been a noticeable decline in the percentage of U.S. adults who say they believe that biblical elements of the Christmas story, that Jesus was born of a virgin, for example, reflect historical events that actually occurred. And although most Americans still say they mark the occasion as a religious holiday, there's been a slight drop in recent years that share who they say who do this. So, I know we probably both know the answer to this. But it's still good to talk about the foundation for why we care so much about this. And that is, why is it important that we celebrate the Christian aspect of the Christmas story? As if the events of Easter are what allows us to be saved or come to a saving knowledge of Christ, why is it the birth that's also very important?
Years ago, and I can illustrate this by a story, in 5th grade Sunday school, Mr. Brooks was my teacher, and he was talking about the importance of Easter and the importance of Christmas, and he asked us as fifth grade boys. He said, "What's the more important holiday, Christmas or Easter?" And I knew what he was getting at, but me being a smart aleck that I was, I said, "Well, it's Christmas because if you didn't have Christmas, you couldn't have Easter. If Jesus was never born, he could never die and rise again." And while that was not the spirit of what he was talking about, and I know what he was trying to get at, there's actually some truth in that. The miracle of the virgin birth is powerful. It's a powerful picture, but it's not just a metaphor. It is a reality that Jesus was God's son and is God's son. I've heard Dr. Adrian Rogers, who was a mentor and a preacher and a great hero of mine, he said, a little child can come to know Christ without believing in the virgin birth. But a grown man or a grown woman that denies the virgin birth doesn't know Christ at all. And that's powerful.
Yeah,
and that's all wrapped up together. And one thing that I've observed, a lot of historians want to say, well, you're celebrating Christmas at the wrong time.
Yeah, I know,
shepherds
right?
would not be out in the fields in December keeping watch like that. They would not.
You're missing the point for
one.
Well,
but let's follow this through if you don't mind. If you don't mind, here's the deal. They seem to think it was about August or September when it actually happened. But if you think, what's the real miracle of Christmas? Was it when he came out of Mary or when he went into Mary?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The Immaculate Conception, as some people call. So if that's the case, if you back up from December to the time frame that they said, we've got it dead on about 10 months before.
From August back to December.
Yeah, you got it right on.
So yeah, my answer is going to be a little bit more, I guess,
less theological.
Well, a little bit more. If X equals Y, or X has to equal Y based. But it's that many of the prophecies in the Messiah were fulfilled in the Christmas story. Miracles that prove Jesus was who he said he was, which is just as important in a lot of ways, because if you look back, there were, 108 different prophecies in the Old Testament.
That's right.
Explicitly saying who the Messiah was. He will fulfill all these. And I know we've all heard the story that to fulfill just like 8 of them would be like filling a state.
Astronomical.
Yeah, filling something the size of the state of Texas with, quarters 2 feet deep, marking one and then finding it blindfolded on your first try. Which is just nuts. I mean, I don't even want to think about it. But things like the virgin birth, being born in Bethlehem, being on the line of David, the flight to Egypt, all of these and more directly relate to the fact that he is the foretold Messiah. So this one's definitely not so much a political show as it is kind of a direct appeal for our faith, which is fine. I don't mind it at all being that. Um, but yeah, and other miracles of the night speak to the overreaching power of God over all of time and space. I mean, the Star of Bethlehem. What's your favorite? What's your favorite thing? I know you've preached on it several times. What's your favorite thing about it coming from north to south?
Oh yeah, I have. I read that in the show notes that you sent me, and I think it's even more significant. It is significant. It was not in the East because that would have just been normal.
The way it rolls, yeah.
Astronomy. I'm sorry, not astrology. But these guys were, the word for the wise men were astrologers. They had studied the stars to find out what the gods were saying to them. But there's something else to that, because 1,000 years before, there had been a godly man in the East named Daniel who told them, he was an important man. People listened to him. And the reason they knew when they saw the star and they went was because God had already planted that, and God already had a plan, and He'd put Daniel right in the middle as a captive boy that turned into an influential man. God had a plan going way back.
It's all, and that's what it shows. I mean, the first set of miracles proves who Jesus is.
Right.
And without it, Easter wouldn't mean a thing, as we talked about.
That's right.
Because the prophecies of the Messiah wouldn't have been met. But the second set also shows the mighty power of God over not just our lives, but all of human history. And both sets show why the Christian aspects of the Christmas story should be celebrated as prime over the cultural aspects.
That's right.
I
I agree. We are on the same page tonight. I thought we'd have some disagreements here.
I know. Honestly, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but I didn't realize I had such juggernauts as Adrian Peterson on my side about.
You don't Adrian Rogers?
Adrian Rogers.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson is a Hall of Fame running back.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
but not Adrian Rogers. Yeah.
Adrian Rogers.
Yeah.
Both juggernauts in their own field. But I'm glad that I have that, because as you'll see in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the way, going back to the article, but some of the ways Americans think about and commemorate Christmas appear to be moving in a more secular direction. For instance, while 2/3 of the Americans continue to say that Christian displays like nativity scenes should be permitted on government property during the holidays, the share who say these displays should be allowed on their own, unaccompanied by symbols of other faiths, has declined by 7 percentage points since 2014. Meanwhile, the share of Americans who believe that no religious displays should be permitted on government property has grown from 20 to 26% over the past 3 years. Remember, this was 4 years ago. Who knows where it's grown to now? Mm-hmm. But it's this next part that really is troubling to me as a Christian, and it's that while most Christians, 73%, continue to think displaying religious symbols on government property is acceptable, Christians as a whole have become less supportive of the position over the years. The change is most pronounced. This is not it. The next is. But as we can see, putting out nativity scenes across many people of faith and not is going down. So, first off, I just want to get this out of the way. My opinion of religious display should be allowed. Yes, they should. As we talked about before, there's a separation of church and state, but there is not a mandate to take Christianity or any other religion completely out of governing. You can't take that out of somebody without 100% changing who they are, what they believe.
Right.
Unfortunately, this puts me in the position of having to defend the satanic displays that are put up as well, or the Muslim displays. I'm sure, actually, Hanukkah, whatever. As a nation that was founded on religious freedom, though, away from state control or endorsement, although not free from elected officials following their religious convictions while pushing policy or voting, government can, or at least shouldn't, stop a nativity scene from going up, but that also means they can't and shouldn't stop any other displays.
Got no problem with that.
And I don't either. I mean,
in fact, God is big enough.
Yeah.
God can handle it.
Yeah, He can.
I got no problem. It actually only accentuates who God is by having this religious freedom. And I'm a Baptist, and Baptists, even before there was a Southern Baptist Convention, have always been known as people of religious freedom, no matter what you believe. So I got no problem with what you're saying.
If I'm not mistaken, the Southern Baptists and the Baptists in general came almost directly from as an offshoot of the Puritans who came over Am I right about that?
No, not exactly.
Okay,
Not, but
well,
it's okay.
There goes my history lesson.
That's okay. You're fine.
Yeah. Sometimes I got to
actually
be
was
fact
from the
checked
Dutch
live.
Anabaptists is where we
Okay.
came from. Yeah, different group of dogs.
All right. Well, you learn something every
Yeah.
day. But
Sorry about that.
no, you're
Sorry
fine.
to correct you. I'm
I
sorry
would
about
rather get it right with you correcting me.
Okay,
in
fair enough.
honesty. So this is the one I kind of jumped the gun earlier. This is the one that makes me very sad. So at the same time, again from Pew, the new study finds a small but significant decline in the share of Christians who believe in the Christmas narrative contained in the Bible. To be sure, large majorities of Christians still believe in key elements of the nativity story as described in the Bible. But the shares of Christians who believe in the virgin birth, the visit of the Magi, I'll make sure I say that right, the announcement of Jesus' birth by angels, and the baby Jesus lying in the manger have all ticked downward in recent years. Overall, the share of Christians who believe in all four of these elements of the Christmas story have dipped from 81%. So in 2014, it was already 1 in 4 people Christians. 1 in 4 Christians didn't believe in this to 76. So that's 1 in 4. 1 in 5 didn't believe. Now it's 1 in 4. As of 2017, with the way that the world's going, I imagine there's some sort of
downward tick.
downward tick there in the past 4 years to where we are today. And this decline has been particularly pronounced among white mainline Protestants, which is really sad. Mm-hmm. And this is, to me, the most disconcerting statistic of all. As I said before, several of these that they mentioned there are instrumental to the broader story of Christ. Without a belief in these Christmas miracles, Christmas means nothing, Easter means nothing, Christianity means nothing. I mean, without these, your faith means nothing.
I agree. And here's the thing. Honestly, I have a hard time getting worked up about somebody causing a stink and taking down the nativity scene in front of a courthouse. This bothers me more. I agree.
Because it directly relates to the hearts of
Because either Jesus is who he said he was or he's not. And if he's not, then as Paul wrote, then your faith is in vain and it's useless. And so all you're doing is you're echoing what Paul told us in the New Testament.
I've got some, I'm glad my theology is right on this. It's pastor approved.
Something like, you can say it any way you want to. I agree. That's the most troubling part of all of this.
And this has to lead somewhat to, 5% in 3 years within the church. And the church has always acted as a check against immoral acts being rampant in the world in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. So the decline of this has got to at least be partially one of the reason it's mirrored in our society.
It magnifies it. It does, no doubt about it.
So I had this question here for you, and I think we've already answered it, but we'll talk about it again. Not believing in the miracles of Christmas, taken to its logical conclusion that Jesus couldn't possibly be the Messiah because he wouldn't fulfill the prophecy, means that you can never come to a saving knowledge of him, or you just believe that Jesus' death saved you. Without belief in this foundational prophecies, that if you don't believe they were fulfilled by accepting the virgin birth, etc., is it still enough to? Without that, is there still enough for you to come to a saving knowledge of Christ?
No, and I think my response that I talked about, with all due respect to Adrian Peterson, Adrian Rogers said, I think gives my answer to that. Mm-hmm. Honestly. You just can't. You can't deny something that critical and still intellectually or spiritually know Christ. You just can't do it. Mm-hmm. And there's some fringe things that we can disagree on between Christian groups that's not going to affect whether you're saved or not. These aren't any of those fringe things. These are first order theology. First order theology. So we're on the same page again. I tell you, this is kind of like
I know. I was hoping we'd have a little bit of disagreement about something.
In the fields of France, when the Germans and the Americans declared a truce at Christmas Eve,
That's a great story, by the way. If you never heard it, look it up. It's quite an interesting wartime tale.
Garth Brooks made a great song out of it.
There you go. So hopefully next time you come on, we'll definitely pick topics that we disagree about.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It's hard at Christmas time, you know.
Yeah, it is because it's just so mainline.
And I can see we're spelling Christmas with a pound sign now. Is the pound sign silent or what? No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. I'm just being silly.
Was that a West Wing reference?
It was.
Okay.
It was.
Also another good show, even if it does lean to the left. So we are to the Christmas story here. And because it is so important, I'm going to let our resident pastor here give you just honestly a biblical reading of the Christmas story. I really hope it moves you, whether you are a Christian or not. I'm sure you've heard it many times, but it is one of the things that you really have to hear over and over again. So without further ado, take it away. If you could
Thank you. I can. I've got enough light here to easily do it. Before I do, another Christmas memory, and I know we're running.
Don't worry about it.
Another Christmas memory. Every year we would. My mom was an only child, so myself and my 4 brothers were the only grandchildren, and we lived right next to her mother and daddy, my granddaddy Hoyt, my granny Bee. And every year on Christmas Eve, that's where we would go. And they really petted us and spoiled us. Granny B would feed us. You might have gotten in on some of her meals.
Oh, they were amazing.
The woman could cook a hole in the wall.
She'd call us, honestly, before we came down from Arkansas. She'd call us and ask us what she wanted, and it was the best breakfast ever.
She could cook like you would not believe. But anyway, we would be over there, and we would get all the presents, and we would seek, because they just went all out because we were the only grandchildren. But before we could touch a present after we had eaten, they had this big family Bible that sat in there. You know, the kind that's got the paintings in the middle of it, you know. And,
Illuminations.
and one of us would always, and we'd always get on to Granny, why do we have to do this? We were ready to open our presents. Never did we touch anything until we talked about what really Christmas really meant. And it was always this right here. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. The census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. So all went to be registered, everyone to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was great with child. So it was that while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were in the same country shepherds living out in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood up before them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were greatly afraid. Then the angel said to them, do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be to all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be the sign to you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. So it was, when the angel had gone away from them into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, let us now go to Bethlehem, and see the thing that has come to pass, which the Lord has made known to us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. Now when they had seen him, they made widely known the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all those who heard it marveled at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things, and pondered them in her heart.
Spoken like a true pastor. No, that is the meaning of Christmas. That is what we're here for. That's why we celebrate. Without this, life would be meaningless. It really would be. Mm-hmm. So, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm so honored to do this for you, Greg.
We're definitely going to have to bring you back, because this is by far the best of the 13 shows. Sorry to my friends, but it helps when you have a professional.
Oh, you keep saying that.
If you're seeing this for the first time, I will. There's a link on this page to my YouTube channel. It's got a lot more stuff like this. Hopefully, the quality will stay this good. But it's the Canceled Misfits Show on YouTube. Subscribe, watch, like it. It helps me a lot. And then over here, share it. This is the episode that we want to have get out, because this is the episode where really, past all the politics, past all the bad stuff in the world, this is what needs to be put out more than anything. So yeah, share it on here, share it on YouTube. Thank you for either. And then go out and do something to get canceled by the left, because you're probably doing something right at that point.
Merry Christmas to everyone. Thank you so much and I hope you and your family have a blessed and healthy and happy Christmas and a happy New Year.
See y'all guys later.